incredible as it may seem, these monkeys learned to feed themselves with a robot arm that was being directly controlled by their brains, as if it was simply part of them.
The natural segue then would be, if I can send motor function from a brain to a mechanical arm, is it possible to send motor functions from one human to another human? So I call it the possession experiment.
Now, do you know the phrase brain power? Well, it turns out that scientists at the University of Washington are trying to hone that power and transmit it to another brain. Researchers call it direct brain-to-brain communication, and they do it by passing a signal from one mind to the next, using the internet nonetheless. So does it sound a little sci-fi, Star Trek mind meld, Jedi mind trick Inception-esque to you? Well, it did to me too. So I brought one of the researchers onto the show to tell me how it works. Dr. Andrea Stocco is an assistant research professor at the University of Washington, and he told me why this concept is not as weird as it sounds.
It's not so science fiction. We use currently existing technologies to read the brain patterns in a person and to transmit them to a different person. And we can only do it with very simple impulses right now, like motor commands to control the hand, for instance. So it's not that science fiction. It was definitely possible years ago. It's just that we were the first to try it. It was connected over the internet. And the second computer controls a stimulating coil that produces a magnetic field. And it's the magnetic field that is eventually directed over the head in such a way as to reproduce the particular command in a selected part of the brain. In this case, the part of the brain that controls the right hand. The wireless connection enters only in the communication between the two computers. The two computers can be in the same room and connected physically, or they can be in any part of the world and talking to each other through the internet. Most importantly, they can be done in a way that is non-invasive without requiring surgical application of electrodes inside the brain, for instance. Two big directions are developing a more sophisticated way to control motor commands so that a person can think more complicated movements, like playing the piano, or if you're a surgeon performing a very complicated surgery. And this can be used to control another person who doesn't have the same skills to perform the same movements.
Now, you and your colleagues have described this process as, quote, lending part of your brain to somebody else. Could you think that this could be helpful with something like maybe medicine, where you have someone who's paralyzed and the other person is telling them to move their hand?
It is possible.
Essentially what's happening is when one person is playing the video game, they're not using their hands. They're simply looking at targets. What's going on in the other room is a transcranial magnetic stimulation device that creates a magnetic field that excites neurons. And it's the other man's hand that begins to move and hits the targets. So you've co-opted the portion of a body of another human, and then their hand can behave in the way that you want it to do.
2013, former President Barack Obama was announcing his administration's brain research through advancing innovative neurotechnologies. The study, describing a way to manipulate a lab animal's brain circuitry accurately enough to turn behaviors both on and off. The point of the remote control mouse is not to create an army of robo-rodents, but to perfect a technique that will control the behavior by activating and deactivating neurons. The technique used to control neurons is called DREADS, designer receptors exclusively activated by designer drugs. Because the receptor does not respond to other molecules, including natural ones in the brain, the only way to activate the neurons is via the human-made ones. DREADS allow scientists to manipulate neurons without implanting anything in the brain. Look at this. Current optogenetic experiments rely on extracting opsins, light-sensitive proteins, from plants which can be introduced to mammals by methods including injection and infection via adenovirus. What they do is they genetically engineer a receptor that can get into a person through a viral vector, and what that means is through an injection of the vaccine or through the contraction of an adenovirus which has been modified. You might think, oh well, I just won't get injected, and I won't go anywhere where I can get this adenovirus.
Streetlights, what do you think about them? Well, I've had, people come up to me and go, have you seen the cameras on the streetlights? And I was looking the other day, and I don't think it's a camera, but that green light looking like maybe another green light underneath, or I don't know what it is honestly, but like I thought I'd do some research, so I just typed in these numbers and letters that came up, and have a look what actually came up. Like, no shit, top of the list. It sort of freaked me out.
If we could figure out the role that each of these cell types plays in the brain, we could understand how they work together to create thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and how flaws in specific cell types may lead to devastating brain disorders like schizophrenia, Parkinson's, and depression. Now, MIT researchers are working to develop tools that allow us to do exactly that. It is now possible to precisely control the activity of specific neurons, and therefore understand how each neuron contributes to brain function. Remarkably, these high-tech tools have come from microorganisms, such as this pond algae called Chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas needs light for photosynthesis, and it swims toward light with the help of a small organelle called an eye spot. The eye spot contains a light-sensitive protein called channel rhodopsin, which responds to blue light by moving positively charged ions across the eye spot membrane, causing the voltage of the eye spot to change, a bit like a battery being charged by a solar cell. But neurons are also electrical devices, and their voltage would also change if channel rhodopsin could be inserted into their membranes and then illuminated. So, researchers took a piece of DNA that encodes for the channel rhodopsin protein. Then, they put it into neurons, using a safe and effective method for delivering a gene, the same kind being used in human gene therapy trials. The neurons expressed the DNA, manufacturing copies of the channel rhodopsin protein and installing them in their membranes. As predicted, the researchers were now able to activate these neurons using light, without affecting neighboring neurons. This technique, called optogenetics, allows researchers to drive the activity of specific neuron types to see how they affect brain activity and behavior. For example, researchers can deliver the piece of DNA that encodes for channel rhodopsin into a set of basket cells, shown here in green. Then, pulses of blue light activate only the basket cells, while the other cells, for example the neighboring pyramidal cells, are not affected. So if a specific brain disorder is associated with dysfunctional basket cells, it would be possible to augment the activity of these cells and possibly repair brain function. And these tools don't just activate neurons, they can silence them as well. Archirhodopsin and halorhodopsin, for example, are proteins that are sensitive to orange light and produce the opposite effect to channel rhodopsin. When researchers deliver DNA that encodes for one of these molecules into a specific set of cells and shine orange light within the brain, they can turn off just the selected set of cells. By combining these tools, along with others now being developed, researchers will be able to control brain activity with a degree of precision that would have been unimaginable a few years ago.
Cloud seeding is the oldest and simplest weather modification technology. All clouds are made up of some form of water vapor. For raindrops or snow to form, a tiny impurity called a condensation nucleus must be present, but in nature they're rare. Cloud seeders use airplanes to inject impurities into the clouds. The water vapor forms droplets around these nuclei, eventually growing 100 times bigger, big enough for gravity to pull them from the sky. In a standard seeding scenario, the cloud bottom plane flies below the base of the cloud and releases silver iodide particles into the warm, rising updraft. The cloud top plane pierces the cloud core and drops dry ice directly into the supercooled vapor region at high altitude. This is Tad Delsing. He'll be one of the pilots flying out for today's seeding run. It's his job to prepare the plane for what might be a rough ride today. Along with typical fueling and flight check tasks, Delsing also needs to fill the silver iodide seeding tanks. Then he'll wait for Geiger's call. Even without definitive proof, cloud seeding continues to be practiced in over 34 countries worldwide. But silver iodide and dry ice nuclei are Stone Age technologies compared to today's higher-tech particle payloads. The most amazing of these belong to a family of weather mod devices that are so small you might not see one, even if it was floating in your eye. Ranging from the ultra-tiny to the nearly invisible, these are the revolutionary micro-machines that will be the workhorses of any world weather control system. They're MEMS, micro-electromechanical sensors.
There are approximately 2,000 weather balloons launched globally, worldwide, every day.
Those balloons play a huge role in helping us predict and potentially control our weather. But what if we could launch 10,000 weather balloons a day, or 10 million? That's exactly the theory behind GEMS.
GEMS are global environmental MEMS sensors, a concept that we have come up with that deals with a massive wireless network of airborne probes.
The idea is to release 10,000 or more of these dust-sized probes every day from airplanes, stratospheric platforms, or satellites. Like weather balloons, the probes would monitor weather information over every kilometer of the Earth's surface at a resolution that is today unheard of.
We envisioned that the GEMS probe itself would have a bio-inspired design, something like a maple seed or a dandelion seed that actually incorporates the constructs of nature to achieve aerodynamics and buoyancy.
With an ongoing stream of millions of measurements, the accuracy of our picture of the atmosphere could improve 1,000 times over. It's also possible that the GEMS themselves could be made to play an active role in cloud dynamics. In effect, cloud seeding with 1 million microscopic computers.
We could potentially use these very small devices either as cloud condensation nuclei to seed clouds the way that current weather modification is done, or potentially something even more futuristic would be to actually have the devices be active, where they could introduce some perturbation into parts of the atmosphere to actually modify the weather.
But if GEMS are heavier than air, what will happen when these millions of probes finally fall to Earth?
When the GEMS probes land on the surface, either in the water or on the land, they would continue potentially to provide surface observations.
But what about the ones that end up on your picnic table or in your hair?
At the sizes we're talking about, if you actually inhaled one or got one in your mouth or one in your eye, it would probably be no different than, say, a speck of dust or a particular particle in the atmosphere that you would get in. You'd probably sneeze it out or cough it up. They would continue potentially to provide surface observations.
Useful as nanotechnology will be to weather observation and prediction, there's no question that it will also play a significant role in military weather operations. And it will simply be the newest weapon in a secret arsenal dating back more than 50 years.
The record number of fires burning across Brazil's Amazon rainforest has prompted renewed global outcry over climate change. And big spending. $5 million from Leonardo DiCaprio, £10 million from the UK. Meanwhile, Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effect of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels.
This next story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis. A local sociologist will make her findings public tomorrow, but she spoke first to the I-Team's Lisa Zigman.
Lisa Martino-Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in
Northern California, we've got a bit of an unusual situation. Now, this first portion of the radar cycle, fairly bland and typical, but then you see these bands of very distinct cloud cover moving into the region. That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic, or even metallicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar issue, and obviously they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
The Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino-Taylor, was much more sinister.
It's pretty shocking. The level of duplicity and secrecy. Clearly, they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, she uncovered once classified documents that confirm the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide. The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis. It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12. Martino-Taylor claims they all unknowingly inhaled this compound morning, noon, and night so the government could measure its effects on their lungs.
So this is in violation of all medical ethics, all international codes, and the military's own policy at that time.
In 1994, then Congressman Richard Gephardt asked the Army to open its records and explain the St. Louis testing.
We want to make very sure that nothing went on that would harm anyone and that all the facts are out on the table.
Documents released in the 90s show the Army placed sprayers on this former Knights of Columbus building and in Forest Park. The Army always insisted the chemical compound was safe. Martino-Taylor believes documents prove otherwise.
There's a lot of evidence that indicates that people in St. Louis, in the city, particularly in minority communities, were subjected to military tests that was connected to a larger radiological weapons development and testing project.
Features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change. Up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotions.
The focus, as all of you know, today is on what's now called the Internet of Bodies, involving medical implants and other kinds of devices that go inside your body and all together with the Internet as a whole comprise the Internet of Bodies.
The Internet of Bodies, or IOB, is actually an ecosystem. It's a bunch of devices that are connected to the Internet that contain software and that either collect personal health data about you or can alter the body's function. We think of the Internet of Bodies as this collection of all these devices as well as all the data that the devices are gathering about you.
So the Internet of Bodies, imagine the power of AI. What is artificial intelligence? It's a way to automate computation and cognition. So we can now automate learning, perceiving, doing computation. It's a pervasive general purpose technology that will be used in all of our industries, that will come into our professional networks, our private networks, our schools, our industries and our offices. What I wanted to epitomize with the Internet of Bodies is this notion that we will be under assessment, we will be under measure of computation in every aspect of our lives in the future. From what you eat, who you date, what you buy on the internet, how much energy you use, but also what are your vital signs? How well are you doing in terms of health? What kind of specific genetic quirks do you have? What's your genome telling about your health, about your mental health, about how well you are doing, how well you are aging, what kind of disease you are susceptible to? Rising tech platforms, very powerful tech platforms, will have access to our most intimate data, what define us and what shape our lives, our future, our aging process.
Remembering in the Internet of Things, we're things too.
We're things, we're living things.
You have a really interesting introduction to the piece where you look into the future, sort of a speculative. You described a lot of the possibilities there. It has a bit of an Orwellian twinge to it.
Well,
I wanted to ask when you all think we're going to move from this form factor to something that's on your face, glasses, and when computing's all on the edge.
All right, 50 seconds. Who wants to answer quickly?
I think it will go. It will. First of all, it will definitely happen. I was talking about 6G earlier, which is around 2030. I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
Can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants.
It's customary for the British Prime Minister to come to this United Nations and pledge to advance our values and defend our rules, the rules of a peaceful world. No one can ignore a gathering force that is reshaping the future of every member of this assembly. There has been nothing like it in history. When I think of the great scientific revolutions of the past, print, the steam engine, aviation, the atomic age, I think of new tools that we acquired, but over which we, the human race, had the advantage, which we controlled, and that is not necessarily the case in the digital age. You may keep your secrets from your friends, from your parents, your children, your doctor, even your personal trainer, but it takes real effort to conceal your thoughts from Google. And if that is true today, in future, there may be nowhere to hide. Smart cities will pullulate with sensors, all joined together by the Internet of Things. Bollards communing invisibly with lampposts, so there is always a parking space for your electric car, so that no bin goes unemptied, no street unswept, and the urban environment is as antiseptic as a Zurich pharmacy. But this technology could also be used to keep every citizen under round-the-clock surveillance. A future Alexa will pretend to take orders, but this Alexa will be watching you, clucking her tongue and stamping her foot. In future, voice connectivity will be in every room and almost every object. Your mattress will monitor your nightmares, your fridge will beep for more cheese, your front door will sweep wide the moment you approach like some silent butler, your smart meter will go hustling of its own accord for the cheapest electricity, and every one of them minutely transcribing your every habit in tiny electronic shorthand, stored not in their chips or in their innards, nowhere you can find it, but in some great cloud of data that lowers ever more oppressively over the human race. We're already using all kinds of messaging services that offer instant communication at minimal cost, and these same platforms, could also be designed for real-time censorship of every conversation, with offending words automatically deleted.
What the hell is that?
John Spartan, you are fined 1 credit.
Bad language, chocolate, gasoline, uneducational toys, and anything spicy. Abortion is also illegal, but then again, so is pregnancy if you don't have a license.
Indeed, in some countries, this happens today. Will nanotechnology help us to beat disease, or will it leave tiny robots to replicate in the crevices of our souls? Today, people who are still actually anti-science, a whole movement called the anti-vaxxers, who refuse to acknowledge the evidence that vaccinations have eradicated smallpox, and who, by their prejudices, are actually endangering the very children they want to protect. And I totally reject this anti-scientific pessimism. I'm profoundly optimistic about the ability of new technology to serve as a liberator and to remake the world wondrously and benignly. Indeed, in countless respects, technology is already doing just that. Nanotechnology, I mentioned earlier, revolutionizing medicine by designing robots a fraction of the size of a red blood cell, capable of swimming through our bodies, dispensing medicine and attacking malignant cells like some Star Wars armada. Neural interface technology is producing a new generation of cochlear implants, allowing the gift of hearing to people who would otherwise not be able to hear the voices of their own children. We will vanquish killer diseases, eliminate famine, protect the environment, and transform our cities. So there is excellent work being done in the EU, the Commonwealth, and of course the UN, which has a vital role in ensuring that no country is excluded from the wonderful benefits of this technology, and the Industrial Revolution it is bringing about. But we must be still more ambitious.
So I want to talk to you today about the future of our species and really the future of life. We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. Now, how exactly will the future masters of the planet look like? This will be decided by the people who own the data. Those who control the data control the future not just of humanity, but the future of life itself. Now, why is data so important? It's important because we've reached the point when we can hack not just computers, we can hack human beings and other organisms. Now, what do you need in order to hack a human being? You need two things. You need a lot of computing power, and you need a lot of data, especially biometric data. Not data about what I buy or where I go, but data about what is happening inside my body and inside my brain. And to understand how you feel and what you think and what you want. Because of two simultaneous revolutions. On the one hand, advances in computer science, and especially the rise of machine learning and AI, are giving us the necessary computing power. And at the same time, advances in biology, and especially in brain science, are giving us the necessary understanding, biological understanding, that organisms, whether viruses or bananas or humans, they are really just biochemical algorithms. And we are learning how to decipher these algorithms. Now, when the two revolutions merge, when the infotech revolution merges with the biotech revolution, what you get is the ability to hack human beings. And maybe the most important invention for the merger of infotech and biotech is the biometric sensor that translates biochemical processes in the body and the brain into electronic signals that a computer can store and analyze. And once you have enough such biometric information and enough computing power, you can create algorithms that know me better than I know myself. The algorithm tracks your eye movements, your blood pressure, your brain activity, and tells you who you are. You will not be able to hide from Amazon and Alibaba and the secret police. As you surf the internet, as you watch videos or check your social feed, the algorithms will be monitoring your eye movements, your blood pressure, your brain activity, and they will know. They could tell Coca-Cola that if you want to sell this person some fuzzy, sugary drink, don't use the advertisement with the shirtless girl. Use the advertisement with the shirtless guy. You wouldn't even know that this was happening, but they will know, and this information will be worth billions. Once we have algorithms that can understand me better than I understand myself, they could predict my desires, manipulate my emotions, and even take decisions on my behalf. And if we are not careful, the outcome might be the rise of digital dictatorships. By hacking organisms, elites may gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself. Because once you can hack something, you can usually also engineer it. And if indeed we succeed in hacking and engineering life, this will be not just the greatest revolution in the history of humanity. This will be the greatest revolution in biology since the very beginning of life 4 billion years ago. So does the data about my DNA, my brain, my body, my life, does it belong to me or to some corporation or to the government or perhaps to the human collective. At present, big corporations are holding much of the data, and people are becoming worried about it. So who should own the data? I frankly don't know. The future, not just of humanity, but the future of life itself may depend on the answer to this question. Some of the big corporations, like Google, like Facebook, the usual suspects, they understand what is at stake. I also think that some governments, especially the Chinese government, I think they understand what is at stake. I think certainly most humans have no idea.
Right.
Again, the thing is, just to make it clear, it's the biometric data is the key. When people think about data, they mostly think about where I go, what I buy. When they think about hacking, they think about computers. They talk about AI, about machine learning. They forget the other side of the equation, which is the life sciences, the brain sciences. The brain sciences are giving us access to here. This is what we really tried, what somebody is really trying to hack is this, not this.
Right.
Science is not really, at least this is my view as a historian, science is not really about truth, it's about power. No, I think maybe in a couple of decades when people look back, the thing they will remember from the COVID crisis is this is the moment when everything went digital. And if this was the moment when everything became monitored, that we agreed to be surveyed all the time, not just in authoritarian machines, but even in democracies. And maybe most importantly at all, this was the moment when surveillance started going under the skin. Because really we haven't seen anything yet. I think the big process that's happening right now in the world is hacking human beings, the ability to hack humans, to understand deeply what's happening within you, what makes you go. We need to realize that humans are now hackable animals. You can hack them. I don't think that the question of, is very interesting or very central. It has been central in Western civilization because of some kind of basically theological mistake made thousands of years ago. But it's a misunderstanding of the human condition. Humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over. Free will, that's over. People could look back in 100 years and identify the coronavirus epidemic as the moment when a new regime of surveillance took over, especially surveillance under the skin. We have all this still myth of free will, that everything we choose is of our own free will. And this is a myth that served us well for a couple of centuries, but now it's becoming dangerous. You don't have any answer in the Bible what to do when humans are no longer useful to the economy. You need completely new ideologies, completely new religions, and they are likely to emerge from Silicon Valley or from Bangalore and not from the Middle East. And they are likely to give people visions based on technology. Everything that the old religions promised, happiness and justice and even eternal life, but here on earth with the help of technology, and not after death with the help of some supernatural being. All this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news.
Wait, that's not true?
And now if you give the tools to start changing or overcoming biology, just think about sex life. Mm-hmm. Almost every religion and every ideology wanted to really change human sexuality or limit it. But they couldn't. You had vows of chastity in the church, and how many people actually lived up to the vows of chastity? Now think, if you can really start messing with human biology, what will be the result of these sexual fantasies of different religions and ideologies. We are in the process of becoming gods. And the big question that faces us in the coming decades is what to do with our new godlike powers.
Tad O'Malley has been making claims.
Claims about what?
You and everyone you know has a piece of DNA in your genome, put there without your knowing it.
Put there by whom?
Well, that's the question of the day.
This is an internet lunatic. You're not saying you believe him.
Hold on, Agent Einstein. You're talking to a scientist.
Forgive me, Assistant Director. It may sound insensitive, but the suggestion is pure science fiction.
What I'm saying, Agent Einstein, is that the facts, as I understand them, cannot be discounted out of hand.
No one has the right or the ability to tamper with your DNA.
Unless we gave them that ability.
You say they're tampering with our DNA, that they're able to shut down our immune systems by the addition of something to our DNA.
Yes, but I don't know how exactly.
Or how it's being triggered.
I don't know that either.
Or why it's happening now. What can we possibly do?
We need to act quickly.
You were right about that.
Well, I was wrong about the science. I was wrong about what's causing it. Dead wrong, in fact.
But it's clearly a widespread failure of our immune systems.
Through gene tampering. A virus within a virus that was put there through the smallpox vaccine. It's what these men are calling the Spartan virus.
We have to figure this out. What's wrong with the science?
Okay. The Spartan virus removes the adenosine deaminase gene from your DNA. Removes the ADA gene and your immune system will simply vanish.
Yeah, but I'm not getting sick.
It's only a matter of time.
Okay. So how does it work? How does the virus remove the ADA gene?
A process called CRISPR-Cas.
CRISPR-Cas9. RNA and a protein cutting genes at exact locations.
Exactly, but in this instance used as a weapon.
The ultimate weapon. The ability to depopulate the planet. To kill everyone but the chosen.
By tampering with their DNA.
Through gene editing.
Why do such a thing and lie about it? Our own government.
Your own government lies as a matter of course, as a matter of policy. The Tuskegee experiments on black men in the 30s, Henrietta Lacks.
What are they trying to do?
That's the missing piece.
But it's not hard to imagine a government hiding, hoarding technology for 70 years at the expense of human life and the future of the planet. Driven not only by corporate greed, but a darker objective.
The takeover of America.
And then the world itself, by any means necessary, however violent, or cruel, or efficient. By severe drought, brought on by weather wars, conducted secretly using aerial contaminants and high-altitude electromagnetic waves. In a state of perpetual war. To create problem, reaction, solution scenarios to distract, enrage, and enslave American citizens at home. With tools like the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act, which abridge the Constitution in the name of national security. The militarization of police forces in cities across the U.S., the building of prison camps by the Federal Emergency Management Agency with no stated purpose, the corporate takeover of food and agriculture, pharmaceuticals and healthcare, even the military in clandestine agendas to fatten, dull, sicken, and control a populace already consumed by consumerism.
And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
A government that taps your phone, collects your data, and monitors your whereabouts with impunity. A government preparing to use that data against you when it strikes. And the final takeover begins.
The takeover of America.
By a well-oiled and well-armed multinational group of elites that will cull, kill, and subjugate.
Happening as we sit here.
It's happening all around us.
The other shoe waiting to drop.
It'll probably start on a Friday. The banks will announce a security action necessitating their computers to go offline all weekend.
Digital money will disappear.
They can just steal your money?
Followed by the detonation of strategic electromagnetic pulse bombs to knock out major grids.
What will seem like an attack on America by terrorists or Russia.
An invasion of the U.S.
The Russians tried it in '47.
Explain that with CBDC as a replacement or a digital currency, they can make the rules of how the currency is used, and they can enforce the rules centrally. Let that sit in centrally. So one great activist said that the implementation of the passports is the end of human liberty in the West, and that is in fact true if we let this control grid go in. Robert F. Kennedy says you can't stop tyranny by complying. And so what I ask you, we cannot comply with the mandates. We cannot comply with the passports. We cannot comply with any part of a financial control grid, whether they change the name from passports and do it with biometrics and ID, whichever way they do it. So this is the fight for freedom and liberty. And what I will tell you again as an investment advisor, most of our wealth in the West comes from the benefits of freedom. And when you give away freedom, you give away anything. When the World Economic Forum says it's 2030 and you have no assets and you're happy, what I hear is it's 2030, we have stripped you of your assets, which may include stripping you of your children, and you're mind controlled. Ladies and gentlemen, don't let that happen.